Hey everyone! In the interest of full disclosure, I feel like I need to start this video by first letting you know that I am not a Republican. Certainly not as the party sits these days. Oh, and don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not a Democrat either. Actually, I think unwavering, unquestioning allegiance to party is one of the big things that's gotten us into this mess in the first place. But that's really for a whole nother video. It's kind of interesting, when you ask the American people what we want in a president, the answers are actually pretty universal. We want someone not corrupted by Washington politics. We want someone who will bring change to the direction the country is going. We want someone we can trust. We want someone who's not a typical politician. So looking at the GOP candidates, how do they stack up against these ideals? Well, let's first start with Mitt Romney. Let's put aside the fact that he's changed his position on just about every fundamental issue he now champions. Let's also try to put aside that feeling in your gut you get when you hear him talk that everything he says and does is scripted by some demographic analyzing well-funded marketing firm. The one thing that his supporters seem to always rally behind is the fact that he can beat Obama. And while I think it's extremely important that we beat Obama in this next election, I think it's also very, very important that the person who does beat Obama changes the direction this country is going. Here's an interesting exercise. Remember back in the Obama campaign in 2008, that socialist liberal left money machine that catapulted him into office? Well, the number 2 donor on his list, giving over $1 million to his campaign, was Goldman Sachs. Interestingly enough, if we look at Mitt Romney's top donors, his number 1 donor is Goldman Sachs. Let me put it like this. Anybody who supports Mitt Romney thinking he's going to take this country on a drastically different direction than Barack Obama, Goldman Sachs is betting that you're wrong. Next you have Rick Santorum. Did you guys watch the last GOP debate? He spent almost the entire debate trying to defend why he voted for all the things that his core belief systems say are so wrong and immoral. I can't think of a better example of what's wrong with Washington than that. Then there's Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich was instrumental in creating the corrupt Washington system that we have today. Then he leaves the speakership to lobby for Freddie Mac and the healthcare industry? That's the essence of Washington corruption. Oh yeah, Newt was a consultant. A historical consultant's not a lobbyist, like an escort's not a prostitute. Then you have Ron Paul. You might have noticed from watching all those last debates that he doesn't really have to spend a lot of time defending his record. Maybe that's because he's voted consistently the same way for over 20 years. He's never voted for tax increases or any spending bills. He predicted the economic crash. He doesn't take money from any lobbyists, and he does what he says, and he's the one that's crazy? One of the things I liked about presidential hopeful Herman Cain was the point that he always made that we have to make sure we're focusing on the right problem. That can be difficult to do in America where we're facing a lot of different problems. But if you ask me, the number 1 most important thing we should be looking at and the root of a lot of our problems is our debt. Yeah, that's right, the $16 trillion that we're currently in the hole as a country. We know this is an extremely important issue because Republicans spend a ton of time telling us how we have to stop this out-of-control Washington spending. What have the Republican candidates offered to fix this critical problem? Well, 3 out of the 4 have proposed a tax plan that actually increases the national debt. Care to guess who the 4th one is that hasn't? You guessed it, it's Congressman Ron Paul. Instead of adding to the national debt, his tax plan would actually cut $1 trillion in the first year. Making big cuts to the deficit might be crazy, but isn't it insanity to continue spending and spending? It's like the other Republican candidates are a group of teenagers sitting around arguing about whether they should go to the mall or go to the movies when the credit cards are all maxed out and those guys from Repo Games have the '88 Ford Tempo loaded up on the back of their truck. Ron Paul also champions a lot of other things that I think are critically important to this country. For instance, did you know that President Obama just signed a bill that allows the American military to detain indefinitely, without charges or trial, American citizens on U.S. soil? Is Ron Paul crazy for thinking that this might be very, very dangerous and completely against our Constitution? Maybe. But if history has taught us anything, allowing a government that kind of control over the people is insanity. A lot of people I talk to will say, I like Ron Paul on most of the things that he says and I agree with him on a ton of stuff, and maybe even I feel like he's the only candidate out there that's really being truthful with the American people, but I just can't get past the foreign policy. Some people in the mainstream media have even gone as far as to accuse Ron Paul of not supporting the troops. Maybe they forgot about the fact that Ron Paul receives more money from active duty military than all other candidates combined. There's lots of ways you can support the troops, I guess. You can say you support the troops. You can put a yellow sticker on the back of your Middle Eastern dependent gas-guzzling SUV, or you can actually listen to what the military says and who they think has the best foreign policy and vote for the candidate they support. The corporate-owned media would also like you to believe that Ron Paul is unelectable. This is probably the one that pisses me off the most. First of all, don't tell me who's electable. That's the reason we have elections. It's up to the American people, not you. Second, if you look at the delegate count, you know the thing that actually matters against who's going to get the Republican nomination? Ron Paul is actually second in committed delegates. I guess the biggest thing to me is that Ron Paul is the only one willing to make fundamental changes to the direction this country is going. Is he crazy for thinking we should link money back to gold and silver? Maybe. But isn't it insane to have an unelected, unregulated group of private international bankers with full control over our money supply? Ron Paul might be crazy for thinking that we should take our foreign policy in a completely different direction, but isn't it insanity to continue to spend trillions and trillions of dollars overseas on wars we can't even win? In closing, it may be crazy to vote for a guy who really thinks he can take on the Washington establishment and change the way this country runs. But then voting for candidates that do the same thing we've been doing over and over again with no success is just insane. I'm Jeff J. O'Toole, and thanks for watching.